I don't even know what "is atheism a Christian heresy" even means. Although, from the way that a lot of Christians talk, everything is Christian in some way, even if it's not. And that's because they've wrapped their entire lives around their ridiculous religions. Taking a crap is somehow Christian, if you don't think about it too much. And thinking about things is not something they really have to worry about because clearly the religious haven't done a whole lot of that. And today is just one more example. Big surprise there. Welcome back to part 2 of "Is Atheism a Christian Heresy?" A claim made by the 401st Prophet. Oh, and Tom Holland, you can't forget about him. I mean, not Spider-Man, some religious dipshit philosopher. Anyhow, as we saw last time, he has absolutely no clue what he's talking about, which is pretty understandable because most Christians have no clue what the hell they're doing. They just really want to believe. So we're going to pick up exactly where we left off, probably in the middle of a concept, but the supercut will come along sooner or later and you can just watch the whole thing in one sitting. If you're crazy. But I'm not going to judge. So let's get back to the action.
People accidentally arose from the primordial soup?
Because that's what we want to believe. Because we have a vested interest, not only in our own survival, but the survival of those around us. Now, I find that the religious don't understand any of this. They don't understand a whole lot. They just have giant theological goggles on, and they can't imagine life without them. Yet, humans are an inherently communal species. We need other humans to survive. Therefore, we go out of our way, at least try, within our local communities, to take care of each other because we need them to make it through the day. I mean, sure, on a global scale, that becomes a lot less necessary, but it is baked into our DNA. And I'm sure that this guy has to understand that, but he's trying so hard to push a theological narrative that he has taken all leave of his rational senses. And again, no surprise there.
From soup they arose, and to soup they shall return. And why should they be considered any more valuable than soup? Still, humanists and atheists believe in the uniqueness of human beings. Why? Because their values are produced whole cloth from their Christian heritage.
Bullshit. In fact, modern Christianity largely comes from secular sources and secular values. And that's really always been the case. If you go back to the very earliest days of Christianity, a lot of the concepts came right out of Greek and Roman mythology. It came from Egypt. It came from a lot of different places. Most of this stuff the Christians didn't come up with. But that's a little bit off topic, so we'll skip it for now. It's why the number of fundagelical assholes is going down. I mean, just look at the Baptists. Their membership is plummeting, down almost 500,000 members in just 2022 alone. That is the largest single-year numerical drop in more than a century. All of Christianity is falling apart. But the crazies who are trying to maintain their fundamentalist faith, they're dropping like a stone. And before you say, well, that was just a fluke, because I'm sure there's going to be some Christians who will try that, the Southern Baptist Convention has been dropping by about 100,000 people a year since about 2010. This is not a healthy religion. It's just not.
Today's atheists try to argue that their view of the worth of humanity can be found in ancient cultures, particularly Greece and Rome, but they can't. It is exclusively the result of Christianity.
Which is all just a lie, and they're very good at that. Now, I don't have to go back to the previously mentioned Greece and Rome to find value in humanity. I don't really know that humanity as a whole has much value. But I figure we ought to keep the smartest and most rational of us around because that's really the only way forward. Otherwise, you get this dumb shit, who is supremely convinced that he's got all the answers when he's just wrong by every demonstrable metric. This is just Dunning-Kruger syndrome on display.
Today's atheists speak with utmost contempt of the book of Genesis, particularly the creation account. But that's where their view of humanity originates.
Except it's not. This is just, well, I know more about you than you know about yourself. No, these are just claims that come up from his backside because he really wants it to be true. No actual atheist input required. Whatever would we do without these theistic imbeciles telling us what we really think? He is talking to himself and to others that think the way that he does. Atheists have not been consulted.
Genesis 1:27 says that man was made in God's image and therefore has infinite worth and value.
I don't care what it says in your stupid book of make-believe. Now, granted, we know that absolutely none of this is being made for atheists. That's true of pretty much all of these religious videos. It's being made by dumb people who aren't at all concerned whether any of it is true or not, for dumb people who just really want to believe. We have not been consulted, but they don't really care about that, do they?
And that's what today's atheists believe.
I really don't think you have any clue at all what atheism is, what atheists think, or what atheists believe. This is the problem that we see all the time with the religious. They aren't talking to us. They're talking about us. They have no clue what we really think because they've never bothered to ask us. They only say what they think we ought to be thinking based on their own particular theology. We are just boogeymen in their heads. In fact, just a couple of minutes ago as I write this, another theist popped up and said, "Well, I just wanted to sin." Great, where the hell did you get that? Especially in light of the very long discussion where I said that sin wasn't even a thing if there wasn't a God. It has nothing at all to do with me. It has to do with whether or not your imaginary friend is real. Yeah, mostly I think they're just having conversations with themselves because they sure the hell aren't talking to us and they sure the hell aren't listening.
And that's why they believe it. And no one has ever believed it unless they were at some point exposed to this doctrine.
We could probably just fast forward to the end and not miss anything, which sadly is usually true with most theist videos. They just aren't saying anything intelligent. They're just spouting religious jargon because it gets them where they want to go. But that doesn't actually mean anything to the non-God-soaked. It's why they think they get to tell us what we think, because clearly they know us better than we know ourselves. At least that's what they'd like to think is so. It's really too bad it's all bullshit, right?
Holland finishes by saying, quote, "To live in a Western country is to live in a society that for centuries and in many cases millennia has been utterly transformed by Christian concepts and assumptions."
Yeah, no. That is simply not true. In fact, most Western cultures today are about as far from Christianity as you can get. Of course, the religious just don't like that fact, so like so much of what they do, they just look for anything that they can remotely relate to and declare, "Well, God done it," or "My religion done it." That's pretty much the same thing. The reality, though, is that it's been Western culture that has largely influenced Christianity over the centuries. It's why so many Christian churches have had to modify their theology and try to explain why the things that they embrace today, well, it just doesn't quite match up with what's actually in the Bible. They did that for survival. They were losing members, and maybe if they just appealed to gay people or something like that, maybe somebody would come and sit in the pews and give them some money. It's not that hard to understand unless you're religious.
So profound has been the impact of Christianity on the development of Western civilization that it has come to be hidden from view.
Except it's not. Not really. Most of the things that Christianity has influenced over the years stopped mattering decades or centuries ago. And I know that these people really want to feel special, but they're really not. Mostly Christianity, and this goes for a lot of religions, but mostly it's just a relic. It's a holdover that's just waiting for its increasingly elderly believers to drop dead and go away. Very, very few young people, comparatively, buy into Christianity or just about any other religion, especially in the Western world. They just look at you people funny, as most of us do. You people are out of your ever-loving minds. Who here is surprised?
Modern atheists do not derive their views from careful reasoning and the application of science. They derive them from medieval theology based on the Bible.
No, not even close. Of course, you have to remember that this jackass has never actually asked any atheists where they get their ideas. He just assumes that it's true because that's what he wants to believe. But that doesn't make any of it true. This is pretty much the case across the religious world. They are all saying things that personally appeal to them on an emotional level, because they don't really care if any of it is actually so. But you just want to sin. No, you're just an idiot. We don't believe that sin exists. We don't believe your God exists. Just because it says so in your big book of stupid stories, that doesn't mean anything. If you just asked us before you open your mouth, maybe you wouldn't look like such a moron. But you didn't do that, did you? And this is why these people look so stupid. Because they are.
The founding document of the United Nations has what they call the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And I don't give a shit what it says. I mean, I'm going to let him get to his point before I completely tear it apart, but I personally put pretty much zero faith in the UN at all. I don't think it's done a whole lot of good, do you? But I guess we should let him get back to it and make a fool of himself some more.
But they are not universal at all. They are Western, and specifically Christian.
No, they are absolutely, positively, most definitely not. So let's take a quick look, because I don't think any of it is going to work out well for this doofus. Article 1 says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, the Bible says everyone's born a sinner and can never do any good without God. It specifically sets these groups at odds. You're either with us or against us. Now, I agree, universal human rights are complete bullshit, but that's because there's no such thing as universal rights. Try going into most countries in the Middle East and telling them they have to provide universal human rights. They're just going to laugh at you just before they hack your head off. So Article 2, so we're just going to go through a couple of these, says, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Again, that is not remotely universal, and it never will be. That's the thing. These are not realistic expectations. And this is certainly not biblical. The Bible is very, very clear that if you're not part of their particular religious club, you're going to hell. And that's certainly not equality, is it? In fact, the Bible is also very clear throughout that women, they don't have equal rights, and the Bible was demonstrably used in support of chattel slavery and other things like that. So, bullshit. One more. Article 3 says, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Well, that's not even remotely true. That's just something that makes people feel good inside. But that is not how reality works. Again, we just have to go back to the Bible, which not only endorses slavery, but in the New Testament, Paul says for slaves to be obedient to their masters. So much for liberty and security of person, right? Now, there is another 27 articles that we could go through, but we're not going to because that would be really, really, really boring. But even if we did, this dipstick would completely lose. So I don't know who the other 400 prophets were, but I figure they had to be smarter than this asshole.
And every member of the Western elite believes they should be applied to every culture on earth.
Well, I'm not elite, not by any stretch of the imagination, but even I don't think for 1 second that's realistic. That is never going to happen. It's an ideal maybe, but that is never going to happen in reality. It's kind of like Christians who think they're going to convert the whole world to Christianity. Yeah, how's that working out for you? Especially given that the first world is rejecting your stupid religion wholesale.
In other words, our atheistic elite believe in spreading a specifically Christian doctrine to every member of the human race.
Which is demonstrably untrue, as I already showed. These are people without the slightest grasp on reality. These are people who do not read or understand the Bible. These are people who are, Christians in name only, because that's most of them. They don't understand any of the stuff they're supposed to believe. They just remember some of the stuff that comes down from the pulpit on Sunday morning and then pretend that makes them experts. Surely you've talked to these people too. People who will tell you all kinds of tall tales about things in their big book of multiple choice that aren't actually there. If you ask them for chapter and verse, they don't know because they've never read the thing. They think there was actually an apple in the Garden of Eden. There wasn't. They think that a whale swallowed Jonah. That's not true. It says a great fish. Mike Ditka, you remember him? He claimed that the scripture said, well, this too shall pass, when he got fired by the Chicago Bears. But that's not true either. It does not appear even once. And of course, one of the most famous, that the Bible says that God works in mysterious ways. No, it doesn't. That does not appear anywhere. The closest you can get is Isaiah 55, 8-9, which says, God's ways are different than our ways. These people don't know what the hell they're saying. But they sure aren't shy in saying it, are they?
My, what aggressive missionaries they are. Holland concludes by asking where all this is heading. Quote, it is hardly surprising, of course, in a society that has increasingly abandoned the institutional practice of Christianity, yet still clings to its assumptions, its values, its myths, that we should shrink from staring the implications of our current predicament fully in the face. End quote.
Except, as I showed, that is demonstrably not true. None of this has anything at all to do with Christianity. This is just reading into things that aren't actually there. And that happens a lot if you notice, because the religious, they don't tend to be that smart. They kick and they scream and throw temper tantrums when they don't get their way, and then they pretend it's all done under the umbrella of their religion. Except they don't really know anything about their own religion, do they? It's all just crap they made up in their heads, and then they said, well, I vaguely remember seeing it somewhere. Yeah, doesn't exist. Then they act like they've got some kind of universal truth that doesn't demonstrably exist. Because they're morons. What else is new?
Then Holland speculates. Was Nietzsche right when he said, when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet? I hope Nietzsche was wrong, but I fear he may be right.
Fuck Nietzsche. I don't think so-called Christian morality is anything to be proud of. The further that we can get from Christian morality, that which is given in the pages of the Bible, the better off we're going to be, because Christianity is shit. Now, I know Christians don't think so, but the Christians, demonstrably, they just aren't that bright, are they? I don't particularly care what they think, do you?
In my next video, I want to take up that question. Will the decline in Christian belief lead to the end of Christian morality?
Hopefully, because a lot of so-called Christian morality is really, really bad. You don't need Christianity to have decent morals. Although, let's be honest, getting rid of Christianity probably gets rid of a lot of the really bad ideas that come along with it. The actual decent ideas, things that they didn't get from their stupid book in the first place, a lot of that is fine. Half of the decent stuff in the Bible, decent in big air quotes, they didn't get from their imaginary friend in the first place, but from other cultures that existed long before it was written. Christianity isn't actually Christian in a lot of ways. It's an accumulation of ideas that stretch back for thousands of years that the early Christians just laid claim to and said, well, because we said so. But that's not how this works, and hopefully more and more people are starting to figure that out as they flood out of the churches, and one would hope, into rationality and skepticism. Sadly, we know that's not exactly the case, and the fight will continue on, even once Christianity and other idiotic world religions are long gone. The problem isn't just Christianity. It isn't just religion. It's human stupidity. And hopefully one day, we'll get that one licked too.